Because this is a lunch hour event, we'll just give it another minute or two for folks to hop on the call before we get rolling.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks for joining us today, everybody. We're just going to give it another minute or two. I got a text from somebody that was asking about the meeting, so I know there's a couple of folks that are still linking up to the meeting on Zoom. So we'll give it till like 4 or after or something like that. All right, we're 4 minutes past the hour, and so I think that's a good time to get things rolling. If there's some stragglers coming in, we can either catch them up to speed or what have you. This webinar will also be recorded and posted on our YouTube page for folks to watch afterwards. Please share around if there are folks that you think would be interested in hearing this presentation and that aren't able to make it today. So. Yeah, again, we're very pleased that the team from DNR has agreed to present on aquatic farm leasing process and the program itself today. And we're joined by Christy Collis, the director of the Division of Mining, Land, and Water, and Kate Dufault, the program manager for the aquatic farm leasing program. And I guess it's with those introductions underway, I suppose we'll just hand over the reins and let the folks from DNR take it away. And then there will be some time for Q&A afterwards, of course. And we're very pleased again that we're able to provide this opportunity for this direct engagement with the team at DNR. So all yours, Director Collis.
Thank you, Jason. Happy to be here. We were very excited at the opportunity to come and speak to all of you and explain our process and answer any questions. I used to actually work in the aquatic farm program about 7 years ago. So it's exciting to see where we've come since then. The team has really come together and trying to streamline processes. We have 2 new staff positions that were able to join the team to help with the increase in workload due to the interest in growing the mariculture industry. So I know Kate has been a part of that team for a bit now, and she is now managing the team that processes all these applications. So I'm going to pass it over to Kate to run through the program, and she has some other subject matter experts on the line as well.
Yeah, thank you, Christy. I will echo what Christy said and that we are very excited to be here. We are always happy to answer questions and share information about our process. And the rest of the team is here as well. So that would be Karen Coogan, Brent Reynolds, and Jen Kopnicki. So we have the full team here. And I'm going to present an overview of our program. So I'm going to share my screen. I've got some slides presented. Just give me just a moment. Okay, and can everybody see that all right? Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I am Kate Dufault. I am the program manager of the Aquatic Farm Leasing Program, and today I'm going to be presenting an overview of our leasing process for new applications, lease renewals, amendments, and as some numbers on aquatic farm sales and lease authorizations. So to start us off, what is an aquatic farm site lease? An aquatic farm site lease is a 10-year property right granted by the Division of Mining, Land, and Water that allows a lessee to utilize state-owned tide and submerged lands for commercial shellfish and aquatic plant farms. Finfish farming is not legal in Alaska waters. The authority for aquatic farm site leases are governed by an individual set of statutes and regulations as provided under Alaska Statutes 3805083 and Title 11 of the Alaska Administrative Code, Chapter 63. And per regulation, an aquatic farm site lease will be in the commissioner's discretion, be issued for tideland, submerged land, and shoreland managed by the department, and will not include land within a state park or land that has been withdrawn from the state's public domain. And essentially, all that means is that we cannot issue aquatic farm site leases within state parks and obviously not on land that is not owned by the state. So how to apply for a lease? We are currently in our open application period, which is every year from January 1st through April 30th. So we just have a couple weeks left. And there is a joint agency application form. So you use the one application form, and that is reviewed by 3 state agencies, which includes the Alaska Department of Natural Resources, the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, and the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation. And once you have gone through the leasing process with the state, you will also need to inquire with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, as they may require a permit, and possibly with local government if your site is located within municipal or borough boundaries. So application fees depend on the size of your proposed farm. So if your farm will be 1 acre or less, the application fee is $600. For farms greater than 1 acre, but no more than 3 acres, the application fee is $1,200. And for farms that will be greater than 3 acres, the fee is $2,000. And that application fee is non-refundable, so just keep that in mind when you apply. And I'm going to go over an example of DNR costs in a few slides so you can know what to expect those first couple years of the process. Some tips for completing your application. The first would be to read through the full application packet for all of the instructions, consider the submittals and the fees required, set up a pre-application with our meeting. We offer those meetings, and I know Fish and Game offers those meetings as well. So we can take a preliminary look at your site and let you know if there's anything that you need to consider. And then once you're completing the application, you'll want to go through each page and complete it as instructed. Double check all of your information for consistency. So that's going to include the application packet, the project description that you will write, the maps, and the drawings. So an example of what I mean when I say consistency is that there's little details that sometimes people will get mixed up on. So for example, something we see sometimes is someone will say in their project description that they have 10 anchors, but then in their maps, there will be 15 anchors. So that's something that we look for when we're going through those applications, just to make sure everything matches throughout. And as you are designing your site, you want to make sure that all structures, including anchors and lines, are within the proposed site footprint. And lastly, ask us questions. We are here to help. And while we can't fill out your application for you, we are really happy to answer questions for you. If you're not sure what to write for specific questions, we can guide you with that. We can provide resources on creating your maps and diagrams and just any other general guidance. So now I'm going to walk you through the leasing process summary for a new application. So you will hear me throughout this presentation refer to this as a two-step decision process. So when I say two-step decision, this is the process that I'm referring to. So when you fill out your application, you will send that to our department and we will review it with the Department of Fish and Game for completeness. If the application is missing anything or if we have any questions on the application, we will let you know. We'll either send you a letter or an email asking for that additional information. Once the application is complete, we conduct a 20-day agency notice and review period. So we will send the project description, the maps, and the diagrams to other local agencies and other state agencies for their review. Once the 20-day agency notice is complete, we then write the document called the preliminary decision. So the preliminary decision is the state's preliminary decision on whether we are going to issue a lease or not. And the preliminary decision will, contain a discussion about your lease, how much we project your performance guarantee bond to be, how much your annual fees will be, and it will talk about the site, the land use planning for that location. It contains a lot of good information about our process and just the site in general. Once that preliminary decision is complete and has been reviewed by management at DNR, we then send it for a 30-day public notice comment period. So we will send the preliminary decision and that public notice to the agencies that were included on the agency review, to local post offices, local harbor masters, upland owners in the area, native entities, and any other interested parties. And we will collect comments from those parties. Once the public notice ends, we then write a document, a final finding decision, which is that second part of the two-step decision. The final finding will respond to any comments that were received during the public comment period. Once the final finding has been reviewed and signed by DNR management, there is a 20-day appeal period of that decision where the applicant and anyone who submitted a comment can appeal the final decision. Once we get through that appeal period, and if no appeals are received, the final administrative order and decision goes into effect 31 days after the final decision is issued. So that means the decision goes into effect 31 days after it's been signed. Once the decision goes into effect, so on that 31st day, our office will then contact you and request all of the lease deliverables, which must be submitted within 1 year of the final decision issuance. So that's going to include your first year annual fee, your performance guarantee bond. You'll need to obtain commercial liability insurance and return the signed and notarized lease document to us. And that In that first year, you can pick any date you want for the lease to begin. It just does need to be within 1 year of the final finding. And once you turn in all of those documents back to us, we will sign the lease and get it issued, and you will be on your way. And your lease will be active for 10 years. So next, I'm going to go over the annual lease fees. So annual lease fees are determined by our appraisal services section, and they issue what's called a fee report every 2 years. Now, they issue a fee report every 2 years, but that doesn't mean the lease fees change every 2 years. That just means they update the report. Typically, the fees don't change. They haven't changed in a really long time. And they just issued a report this past March that will be good until March 2026. So the annual lease fees are based on the size of your lease. So for leases up to 30 acres, the fee is $450 for the first acre or portion thereof, and $125 for each additional acre. So for a 2-acre farm, the annual lease fee would be $575 per year. Once you start getting into larger leases, the fee calculation does change. So the fee report contains a table with base fees, and the costs for the additional acres are reduced from the $125. So we'll use a 35-acre lease as an example. So the 30-acre base price is $4,075. And for those 5 additional acres, they're going to be $109 each. So for a 35-acre lease, your annual fee would be $4,620. And as the lease size increases, that calculation changes. So if you are not sure what your fee would be, just reach out to us and we can point you in the right direction, get you that information. And that fee report is available on our website. So that information is online and accessible. And if you are considering having a caretaker facility on your site, there are some additional fees associated with that. So again, just reach out to us and we can help you calculate what that annual fee would be based on the size of your lease. So here are the typical costs paid to our department for the first year. And this is based on a 2-acre site. So this is just an example. So for a 2-acre site, your non-refundable application fee is going to be $1,200. The minimum amount required for a performance guarantee bond is $2,500. And that's pretty typical amount that is required for smaller leases. If your lease is larger, that amount will increase. It's based on the size of your lease, where it's located, the infrastructure that's contained within your lease. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. And then your annual lease fee, again, for a 2-acre site is going to be that $575. So for a 2-acre site, the first year cost paid to our department is going to be $4,275. Now we'll move on to year 2. So this would be your lease is already issued. You've already paid your bond. You've turned in all the lease deliverables, so you are actively within your lease term. So at this point, you just pay the department your annual lease fee. So again, for a 2-acre site, that's going to be $575. And if you don't amend your lease throughout the 10 years, years 2 through 10, all you're going to pay is that $575. So, and as many of you on this call are probably aware, we do have a commercial use requirement that is in regulation, which states that commercial use of the site must occur no later than the 5th year of lease operations and continue for the rest of the term. And commercial use is defined as the annual sale of aquatic farm products of at least $3,000 per acre or fraction of an acre, or $15,000 per farm, whichever is less. So next, I'm going to go through the lease renewal process summary. So the first process I just went through, that's a 2-step decision. And the lease renewal, that's going to be a 1-step decision. So that's the big difference between the two. And this is going to be relevant for folks who are in their current lease term, their first term, they're approaching the end of that 10-year period, and they want to apply for another lease term. So our office will send you a letter and a lease renewal application packet approximately 2 years before your current lease term expires. You'll fill out the application and return it to our office. We will review it for completeness with the Department of Fish and Game, just like for a new application. Once the application is complete, our staff will write a renewal decision. And these decisions are a lot shorter than a preliminary decision. Since your lease is already active and issued, we don't need to put in quite as much information into this renewal decision that we write. And another difference with the lease renewal process is once that renewal decision has been signed and reviewed by management, it will be sent for a 30-day courtesy notice that is posted online with a concurrent 20-day appeal period. So there are some differences here between the public notice and a courtesy notice. One of the main differences is that the courtesy notice is posted online. We don't send out a mass mail out of the public notice document, and we are not soliciting comments during this period. And the 20-day appeal period also begins on the same day as the courtesy notice. So those are concurrent. And if no appeals are received on the renewal decision, it will go into effect 31 days after it was signed, just like the final decisions. And if no appeals are received at that point, we will request any needed annual fees that haven't been paid and an updated copy of your liability insurance. Then we'll send you the lease, the new lease for signature. Once you return those documents to us, your lease will be issued for another 10 years. And with lease renewals, there is some good information to know because it can be a little bit confusing. So lease renewal, that term is referring to a specific statutory process that is described in AS 3805070E. And it does state that a lease can be renewed once. However, that doesn't mean that you can only apply for your new lease, your lease renewal, and then you're done. That's not what that means. So what that means is that for every lease that is issued with that two-step decision, the lease can be renewed one time. So think of it as a cyclical process. You apply for a new lease, and then you can renew your lease. After the lease renewal, we'll need to go through another two-step decision if you want to have a third term. And then after that third term, you could then renew your lease again. So every other lease term can be a lease renewal. And another thing to keep in mind is that our office needs to issue a renewal decision before your lease is expired. Otherwise, we'll have to go through that public notice and two-step decision process. Because if your lease expires, then there's no lease to renew. So we do need to make sure that we have this process started before your lease expires. So that's why we'll send you the renewal application packet 2 years in advance. We want to give ourselves plenty of time to get that renewal processed. And if your lease is expiring soon and you want to renew and you're worried about that deadline, we do have an option to extend your lease. So all we need to do to extend your lease is a written request from you, which can just be an email to one of our staff, and a $160 fee. And that lease extension gives us an additional 2 years to work on that lease renewal. But again, the lease extension can only happen once. So we need to, make sure that we are working on that lease application for renewal, and our office, once we get that complete application, will get that decision issued and make sure that you are set up for another 10-year term. And if you're worried about completing the application, you can use material from your previous applications. We just need to make sure that the information from your original application is current and legible. And if all that information in the original application is still accurate, we can absolutely use that in the lease renewal application. So similar to new applications, renewal application fees are based on the size of your lease. So for a lease that's 1 acre or less, the renewal application fee is $280. For leases that are greater than 1 acre, but no more than 3 acres, the renewal fee is $600. And for leases that are greater than 3 acres, the fee is $1,200. So next, I'm going to go through lease amendments. And here I've got some common questions laid out that we get pretty frequently. So if you want to amend your lease, you can apply for a lease amendment at any time. It does not need to be during the open application period. And the process and amendment fee are going to be dependent on what you want to change. So for any request that moves a parcel, expands your lease parcel, increases time that your gear is in the water, or will impact navigation or other public uses, will require that full two-step decision process and be posted for public notice. So it's going to be the same process as for a new application, but it'll just be for an amendment. But it's going to have that preliminary decision, the public notice, and the final finding. We also get questions about moving your parcel, and people wonder if they have to apply for a new lease or an amendment in order to completely relocate their parcel, and we are able to do that through an amendment. And then again, it'll be that two-step decision process. Now, we do also have amendments that don't require public notice. So some examples of that would be, adding a species. Let's say you're cultivating sugar kelp and you want to add bull kelp. We don't need to conduct a public notice for that. Or if you're reducing your parcel boundaries or reducing the amount of gear on your site, those situations would not require public notice. And sometimes, we really have to make that determination on a case-by-case basis. This is a rapidly growing industry. We have a lot of new requests coming in. So if you ask us, what type of amendment do I need? We may have to talk about that internally and then let you know. So the lease amendment fees do depend on which process we need to conduct. So for lease amendments that do not require the two-step decision and public notice, the amendment fee is $160. You'll need to submit a written request, which may require an updated project description or diagrams, depending on what you want to change. And we will let you know what you need to submit. And then once we have reviewed that request, we will issue a letter to you approving that amendment. For lease amendments that do require a two-step decision and public notice, there is a $400 amendment application fee. We have a joint agency amendment application similar to the other new lease application that will be reviewed by us and the Department of Fish and Game and possibly the Department of Environmental Conservation. And this goes back to that two-step decision process. We'll conduct agency review, write the preliminary decision, conduct public notice, write a final decision, and then finally, we will request any needed deliverables from you and get that amendment issued. So next, I'm going to go over our current program status. We currently administer 79 aquatic farm site leases. They range in size from 1 to 182 acres, being the largest farm. And our total combined statewide authorized acreage is currently 1,284 acres. And the farms are spread throughout the state, with 52% being located in Southeast, 33% being located in South Central, and 15% being located in Westward region, which we categorize as Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula. So for farms that only cultivate kelp, we currently have 26 authorized for a combined acreage of 712 acres. For shellfish farms that strictly culture shellfish, we have 45 authorized for a combined acreage of 388 acres. And for combination farms, we currently have 8 authorized, and we have a combined acreage of 184 acres. And this slide shows the annual sales from aquatic farm leases by year. So the most recent sales number that we have compiled are from 2022. We don't quite yet have the 2023 numbers compiled yet, but I think we will soon. So the overall sales, which includes oysters, mussels, and kelp, were $1,938,000. And that is about a $50,000 increase from 2021, or about a 2.5% increase. So I'm really interested to see what the numbers will be for 2023 and see if they increased. And finally, here is our contact information. We do have a website. We have a lot of good information on there. If you're not sure where to start, I would suggest reading through our website and then contacting our office for questions. We have a general email inbox that is available on our website. And then I've also provided all of our personal contact information for the program. Again, the program consists of 3 adjudicators and 1 manager, and our staff is currently made up of Karen Coogan, Brent Reynolds, Jen Kopnicki, and myself. And with that, we can take questions.
Great, thank you for that thorough presentation, Kate. I really appreciate it. Briefly, before we roll into questions, I did want to point out, because there were a number of items in the presentation today that are also being addressed and potentially changed in a bill that is currently going through the legislature. It's HB 329, sponsored by Representative Vance. It would do a couple of things that would, from our current point of view, would help to bolster things and really help out on the farmer side of things, as well as the process side at DNR. But namely, at the renewal point in the presentation today, we learned that you can go through a renewal process and get an additional 10-year renewal. This bill, HB 329, if it does pass, it's passed out of House Fisheries, it's currently in House Resources, would extend the renewal period potentially up to 20 years at the discretion of the department. So all in all, with the initial lease, the one renewal, the term would be 30 years if you got the full 20-year renewal before you needed to go through the full reapplication process, the two-step process that Kate had referred to. Another item in the bill would provide for preference for the current lessee, like a first right of refusal type preference for the current lessee when you're going through that full renewal process, which currently right now is at 20 years. If the bill passes, that would be potentially all the way up to 30 years. So we feel that those are pretty good changes to statute and in support of that. And I suggest, if you aren't already following that bill as farmers and members of the industry, it would be a really great one to track as it makes its way through the state legislature. So I just wanted to briefly share that because it is something that would affect this, what we're hearing in this presentation today. I don't know if anybody at DNR has any thoughts or comments on that bill, or if you just want to move on to questions.
If anyone has questions about how the changes would change our processes, I'm happy to answer those. But yes, we are closely tracking that bill, and the 20-year lease renewal would line up well with the fish and game operation permits, since those are 10-year permits. So yeah, it's been really interesting to see that process take place, and it's great to see how involved the mariculture industry is with the legislation.
Nick, I see you have your hand up.
Hi, everybody hear me all right?
Sure can.
Okay. I'm just wondering, when you do an amendment, does that have to go to Army Corps as well? If you're adding a gear type, say I have a kelp farm and I'd like to add oysters to it. If you're not changing the anchors you're using, does this still have to go to Army Corps?
Yes, I would suggest contacting the Army Corps. I'm not as familiar with their process. It can be difficult to find information on their website. I know a lot of people have difficulty with that. We also have difficulty with that sometimes. But recently, the Army Corps has been engaging in our agency review process a lot more than they used to. So I think it would be wise to contact the Army Corps if you are adding any gear types.
Okay, thank you.
I have I guess a point of clarification on the commercial use requirement, which is $3,000 per acre or fraction of an acre, or up to 15,000 per farm, whichever is the lesser amount. If I'm understanding correctly, so a 2.25 acre farm would be a $9,000 commercial use requirement, because so even a tiny fraction would trigger that full $3,000 CRU. Okay, great.
Yes, that's correct. And to touch on the commercial use requirement, I know it is concerning for a lot of people. And I just want to note that if there are extenuating circumstances, let's say you're a gooey duck farmer, and we know that gooey ducks take at least 7 years to cultivate to be able to sell to market. We are not going to close your lease at year 5 if you're a gooey duck farmer. So we do take into consideration all of the different situations that the industry is dealing with. We know it's not always just a simple situation.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Are there any other questions for the team?
I have a quick question. Sorry, I have a baby
Go ahead.
talking. So, if we're taking on a site that's already leased to another organization, they're like letting us take over their site. Is that a new lease that we have to put in, new application or an amendment, or what would we do for that?
Yeah, so that's a lease assignment. And I didn't touch on that in this process or this presentation, but it's a pretty simple process. You know, you will just need to fill out a form. You may need to fill out a new project description just to make sure that there aren't any major changes to the lease as it's changing hands. You'll need to submit a bond in place of the original bond that was submitted. And it's pretty straightforward. Once you have a business license, any information that we need has been submitted to our office, and you have supplied a new bond, we can get that lease into a new name.
Great, thanks.
Thank you for that. Curtin Avenue, I see you have your hands up. Fire away.
Yeah, we are probably a little over halfway through the permitting process for a kelp farm for all 3 species of kelp, and we wonder about if we did want to amend that to add like oysters. Do we need to wait till this, because we know that takes some time? Do we need to wait till we're fully through the process for the kelp farm before we do that? Or can we do it while we're waiting for to get through the process for the kelp lease?
So we won't be able to process the amendment until the lease has been issued, but you can absolutely start working on that amendment application. I would just wait to submit your amendment application until your lease is issued. So just in case if your lease is appealed, you know, we don't want to have you pay that amendment application fee and then have to sit on that for however long the appeal process takes. But yeah, if you want to start working on your amendment application, you can definitely do that. If you have questions on it, feel free to reach out, but you'll want to wait until you have your lease in hand before you submit that application.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Nick.
Is this presentation available anywhere?
It is not online, but I'd be happy to provide it to AMA.
That'd be great. Particularly the slides about the state's production and number of farms and stuff would be really useful in some of the presentations I'm doing on the side. So thank you. I appreciate the information. It's great.
Great. And for what it's worth, Nick and others, this webinar is being recorded, and we will post it and host it on our YouTube page as well to go back and review if you want the speaker context as well as the slide. Any other questions for the team at DNR while we have them on the line here? Well, I like to think a presentation with few questions means that you are thorough in your presentation and hit off, checked off all the boxes that people had questions or concerns about. So I'll give it one last call before we give everybody some time back. This is a lunch hour, so thanks again to the team from DNR for joining us at a lunch hour as well.
Yeah, we're always happy to share our process, and I know it's a lot of information, so feel free to reach out to us if you have more questions.
Well, I don't see any other hands come up. I see Director Collis has come off.
I was just going to say thank you so much for the opportunity to let Kate present. And like Kate said, she's happy to take any phone calls or emails. The team is here to help. Rather deal with issues up front than have you sit and be frustrated with the process. We're here to help. So thank you.
Thank you as well. Well, I don't see anybody else coming off mute, nor do I see any hands coming up. So I will, I guess, make the decision to officially call this one. Thank you again, Kate and Director Collis and everybody else from the DNR team. We really appreciate your willingness to come and speak to us about the process. And, engage with us directly. So thank you again. And to folks on the line, again, the contact information was shared on the slide deck. And I would definitely suggest reaching out if you have questions you want to deal with directly. In my experience, DNR has been very helpful throughout all this process. So
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
thanks. Take care.